Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we're still on about Wheel of Fate. And this video I make after having done 100% of it within the first 24 hours of being released. So this effectively is going to be my final thoughts after having done all of it completely. And obviously, vast majority of the player base absolutely hate this piece of content. And it's hard to argue with that. It is not a great piece of content, in my opinion, looking at it objectively. At the same time, and I want to make this absolutely clear, I did not have as much hate for this content, and I still don't, as most people. And I'll explain that bit. And then we're also going to look into the majority of the players' issue with this piece of content. Because again, from my subjective standpoint, as a player with fairly big roster, as a player with a moderately decent skill level, and, a stash full of revives, this was not the most awful thing KABAM has done. And for me personally, it was about 8 hours of game time. Was it super fun? No. It was mainly not fun. Some fights were good, but there were a lot of times when you felt very, very bored or tedious or annoyed doing this piece of content. It didn't feel like necessarily a huge challenge to the skill. Nonetheless, I do have several issues with it. So I'm going to break down my personal gripes with the content. And then, obviously, we're going to take a look at the community's opinions. And my personal first issue with the content is, and still remains, the blue balling of the Human Torch. Because KABAM said that you are going to get the selector containing the defenders used in this quest. There was no except, or there was nothing else added to it. And therefore, obviously, initially when you opened this, because KABAM never made a full list of defenders public, this was never discussed before, KABAM could have avoided this completely by saying, not going to include those and those champions or whatever, because they didn't announce any information about the defenders, about the event itself, like just about anywhere up until it dropped. Obviously, when you open this and you see Human Torch, you think like, oh my god, KABAM finally doing something generous. Is KABAM finally, has KABAM finally heard about the players' frustrations about paywall champions, and Human Torch being the next big paywall champion in July sale, and are giving an alternative way to earn that champion. For a brief, glorious moment, I felt as if KABAM is being good to the players. I was like, oh my god, this is awesome. I can't believe KABAM is this awesome. It's great. And I should have never believed, because KABAM is not that good, and obviously Human Torch is going to get paywalled for like $500 or something, and you can't get him regardless of how difficult this content is, and you probably will not be able to get that 7-star Human Torch in any other way, shape, or form for foreseeable future, which sucks. The fact itself sucks. What sucks even more, that this felt like KABAM is playing with the players. And this is a constant issue with KABAM, because they are very bad at their messaging. The same thing was, very frustrating with the Dark Phoenix. Number one, the fact that we do have effectively, again, paywall champion. That's frustrating in itself. What was even more frustrating, that paywall champion was added in place of effectively what community expected to be Hulkling or CGR to be added as one of the hard to fight champions. And KABAM knew that is the word on the street. KABAM knew that players are expecting that, and they did nothing to clarify the situation. They did everything to mislead the players, just like right now again. They did absolutely nothing to clarify the situation beforehand when it goes live, and then effectively there's the backlash. That's very bad. Number two, what I don't like about this is that there's not a single 6-stone in sight. effectively, I don't like the quest rewards. The distribution of them is very weird as well, because this entire quest, you could argue that quest number 1 is like the second most difficult one, quest number 2 is the most difficult one, quest number 3 is probably the easiest one. But quest number 3 has the best rewards. It doesn't, and it's very weird. I understand that it's kind of meant to be the completion rewards, but the fact itself that, you know, many players will do like one of these quests a month, if they do it at all, or like, you know, one in every couple of months. The fact that the initial quest has such a bad set of rewards compared to what you get later is, I think, a bad design. If you're making all of these 3 quests at the same difficulty level, you need to have the rewards to be somewhat similar. For instance, you're giving away tier 7 basics, you know, add 1 in each. Right? And then the final one can have some extra, obviously, because to congratulate you for doing it all, as in like the exploration rewards. But this, for people who have to kind of like grind through it, this is going to be just another reason not to do it. Because they're going to look at this, they're going to think, I'm going to need X amount of revives, I need to rank up X amount of champions. What do I get for it? Nothing. So I do think that design-wise, given the fact that there is no escalating difficulty in this, really, it's just bad. And then the big thing is obviously, because this doesn't give any of the cool new, brand new experience, which is very weird. You'd kind of expect it to be like half a, you know, level, summoner level here, or like a third of it, but nope, nothing. And then, yeah, it's mainly the 6. Also, the final rewards, I kind of got irritated because we have to choose in between that selector or the Titan Nexus. And there's no other Titan Nexus anywhere around. If this content is meant to be as difficult, and again, especially since it doesn't have any 6 stones, you know, couldn't you have done that selector and the Titan Nexus? But okay, that's kind of being nitpicky. But that is to say that the rewards here do not make much sense to me, at the very least, or they do not seem to be overly well thought through. As well as the fact that them not being overly well thought through, I'm genuinely in massive deficit of tier 6 basics, tier 3 elves right now. It could be personal account management issue, but the fact that, again, this does give you like full rank ups and ability to acquire new champions, but no catalyst to rank them up fully. And given the fact that you do need to rank up champions for this, like in my case, means that I have like 7 tier 7 basics right now, because I could do 1 rank 4 before, and I, you know, got enough tier 7 basic catalysts to do 1 rank 4 now, but I don't have any of the supporting catalysts, so that's gonna, you know, take a while, which, you know, is frustrating. Okay, I get it, that's a me issue. But the rewards genuinely seem like they're gonna age very poorly. Not having the 6 stones makes very little sense here. Epoch of Pain that was released, you know, quite a while ago now, like 156 stones in that. This having 0 is very weird. Very bad type of weird. And as an end result, again, I think these rewards are going to be outdated in like 2 months. I still think that in like half a year, nobody's going to do this piece of content. Not overly enjoyable. It is extremely roster demanding, and I do think the rewards will make it absolutely not work. If it had like, you know, some, you know, Titan Nexus in it and, you know, a whole decent chunk of 6 stones, that would make it a lot better. That would potentially, you know, make it so that people eventually end up doing this piece of content. The way the rewards are right now, given the fact that, you know, July 4th is coming in soon, given the fact that tier 7 basics are in fact becoming significantly more available in the game thanks to the Radiant store, I don't think there's going to be a big amount of players that do this piece of content, you know, 3 months from now, let alone half a year from now. And that can't be a design goal for KABAM. It just feels kind of odd. You know, KABAM made Necropolis in a way that, even though Necropolis is currently completely outdated in majority of the rewards, there are still decent arguments to be made that it's still worth doing, because you can get the Maestro, which is, you know, a brand new unique champion. There's still the Titan Crystal in it, you know, which is not too easy to come by, and that still maintains some value, compared for the effort that you need to put in. Those 6-star relics to some accounts might be relevant. And obviously the mastery point, and obviously, the base pool selector might be useful. They made sure that Necropolis rewards age quite well. And even right now, when you combine Necropolis with some of the current challenges, it is still kind of worth doing, because there's still things of value that you can't get elsewhere, or things that, have aged well. This, even though KABAM is bragging this to be the most difficult content that they have made so far, does not seem to have the rewards justified. Again, if you take a look at Epoch of Pain, where is the Epoch of Pain? 156 tons in that. There is, flat out Titan Nexus. There's a generic Awakening Gem. There's the XP that I was talking about. The rewards are just so much better there. Right. Next up. What I really don't like. And again, this is completely avoidable. And this is a personal gripe with the content. Is KABAM is fully well aware that dust effectively is killing a ton of players' phones. Not everybody is affected by it. I don't know how many people, but they still know for a fact that there is a significant percentage of players whose phones almost blow up when you have to play dust. Why add her as a defender here? Like, genuinely just the question, why? Like, I think I used approximately 30 revives for all 3 runs. Maybe a couple more. Like 30 to 32, something like that. And about 10 of them went for this one champion. And it wasn't because the fight was insanely difficult or I'm like horribly awful at the game. It was because of the lag. Because when the lag starts, you can't parry, you can't intercept, you can't even punish special attack properly, and dust just knocks you out. Like, why is she here? And don't tell me it's like my phone's fault or something like that. I have like a relatively recent iPhone. I'm playing on iPhone 15 Pro Max. So it's definitely not just get a better phone type of thing. And KABAM knows that. KABAM's aware of these issues. 100% they are. Why do you add, defenders and very, difficult piece of content that is causing massive issues with lag and is just frustrating players left, right, and center? Is it that hard to use one other champion, one other of the 300 different champions you have? It's just one of those things where it seems that KABAM is being either incredibly incompetent or deliberately spiteful. Where there are things like, hey, it'd be funny if there's that one champion that, is making people's phones lag and overheat. Let's give her 2 million health, massive attack, annoying notes, and force people to do that fight 3 times. Why? It definitely does not make KABAM look good. Right. 4th thing that I disliked with this. And as I said, some of the fights I think were fairly fine. Even with somewhat limited counters, I didn't mind doing them. And then in a handful of the runs, for instance, the initial run, Lady Deathstrike. Bullshit, man, it's like 15-minute fight. Nobody wants to do that. Why do you force us to use a tag like that? There could have been 15 better tags, 15 better selections of champions for that. KABAM specifically chose one where it's not necessarily the fight is hard. It's just that people will absolutely hate it. Because, yeah, okay, cool, we're just going to go to level 3, bypass Deathstrike's abilities, but do no damage, basically. And, still going to finish the fight in like 20 minutes. It's like, why? That is just horrible thought design. And the awful thing is that it was super easy to fix. Even later on when we had significantly less options. Here, null, easy peasy, fairly quick fight. In the other one, we had like Medusa, Storms, like easy peasy, fairly easy, quick fight. But then you give us the choices that there's just not a single, decently good counter to that. And that same goes for, like, you know, some other fights in different runs where we just had, like, no good options. Even if you have every single champion in the game, you had no good options for this, like in round 1, for instance. And it's just tedious as fudge. So those are my biggest gripes. If I'm blue balling the Human Torch, the rewards themselves, I think, are not well thought out and are fairly poor for what they ought to be at this point for hardest content that KABAM has ever created. I think that Reward Torch, fight design, inclusion of dust was definitely taking me off. Right, now on the more and again, on a reasonable perspective, at end of the day, you know, it was 8 hours of playtime. I did get a new rank 4 7-star, which I will be able to rank eventually. Didn't completely hate. Like, there were some fun bits, you know, there were some interesting fights that I hadn't done, like, you know, I like the Human Torch fight. You know, I kind of enjoyed doing the Bullseye with Havoc. It was a frustrating fight, but I enjoyed the fact that I did Bullseye with Havoc. And there were a handful of other fights that I did like. There were plenty of ones that I did find tedious. I must say, this is one of the weaker pieces of content that KABAM has done recently, because again, if you compare it, I think Epoch of Pain was significantly better. I think CCP Korean challenges in not CCP, well, Korean challenges in Necropolis that we had with, you know, the mutants, the gods, the 10-year challenge. I think that was one of the best pieces of content they released recently. I think Ordeal was quite weak just because they did nothing new there, so I can't, you know, prop that up. But again, I love the Necropolis CCP challenges, and I think Epoch of Pain was much better, and the rewards were significantly better for that. You know, Crucible, I think, was much, much better. This quest is kind of like KABAM took the worst idea of Crucible, right? KABAM kind of took the principle of Crucible and made it worse. In every aspect. Like, in Crucible, you could stay locked in for as long as you want. In this one, you can't. In Crucible, you could choose many different options, and in this one, like, you just don't have any options. And yeah, this is genuinely kind of like, let's take everything that made Crucible quite good, throw that away, and let's keep all the worst bits and add some more worst things. And then finally, the biggest source of complaints from players about Wheel of Fate, I think, is the restrictions. Like, realistically speaking, when we're talking about Wheel of Fate, the big problem is that even if you have every single champion in the game, many of the fights will still be bad and crap and boring. That is a big design issue. Because for us to do the fight with the tags that are requested of us, with the best options, many of those fights were still crap. Let alone if you don't have some of those best options, then it feels exponentially worse. Then obviously, the fact that then the difficulty level of this, it's made by extremely artificial aspect. And I think this is the post that kind of summarizes it the best. KABAM is stripping away the identity of the game, and they are stripping away our ability to choose our own adventure or the way we play. That is effectively the essence of this post, which I completely agree with. Because it starts with the design philosophy on the new defenders for Battlegrounds, where, for instance, when you are fighting against Serpent, unless you have a good counter for Serpent, you're just dead. So you have to have, like, one of those few specific options. Same thing goes for Bullseye. Like, you know, unless you have a Bullseye counter, you're dead, or you're gonna take a ton of damage. Now we have Dark Phoenix. So unless you have, like, Nico Minoru or, like, another one of, let's say, 4, 5, 6 champions in the game, you're dead. Or you take a lot of damage, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that feels bad and feels restrictive, because it feels, again, like it's not rewarding your play. It just feels like you're going through the motions, and you're doing as you're told. Because, there are no ways how to, let's say, creatively answer those fights well. Or extremely limited. This quest absolutely plays on that. Where, for these fights, even if you had all the champions in game, it felt bad to do those fights because they were boring and long. And if you didn't, you immediately felt like, okay, this is awful, I can't do this, I'm wasting 10 revives just because I don't have one of the newer champions. I don't think any piece of content ever where requirements are this strict and specific will work or be pleasant. And KABAM seemingly has taken away all the wrong lessons from Eternity of Pain content. Because in Eternity of Pain is where they started doing this. You need like a medium metal villain, for instance, or something like that. And there's like 10 champions, and out of those 10 champions, one is kind of like a good counter for that fight. And in Eternity of Pain, obviously, a lot of people already heavily disliked how restrictive it is. But it still felt very manageable because it's microdosed. Because it's like, one fight every couple of weeks, and you need to do it only once to get the objective. And it doesn't feel as bad because you can kind of brute force your way through it. And again, you just do it, just a one fight, just a million health, just once every 2 weeks, a couple of revives you throw in there. But when you pile together like a dozen fights like that, it feels, again, exponentially more shit. Because it feels like, okay, so I just had a miserable time in this fight, and I'm going to have a miserable fight in that time, and I'm going to have a miserable fight in that time, and I'm going to have a miserable fight in that. And it's not good. It's never going to work. I don't think it's good how they do the objectives for Eternity of Pain or Summer of Suffering and all that stuff. Nobody really likes that. But we kind of tolerated it because, again, it's relatively small doses, and you could bulldoze through with a couple of revives. Here, it's just significantly more shit. And I think that is kind of the source of the problems here. Yet, as a piece of content, ending very standing, I don't think this is completely unplayable and garbage. I don't think it's great. But that's like having done it all like already and having had the means to do it. But looking from outside in, for instance, against that gore, if you don't have Void or Wong, what you're doing, farming 50 revives. I heard somebody did that gore with like Spot and like 12 revives or 15 revives. It's such a miserable time. And surely KABAM can't possibly think that people like this piece of content. And here is the surprising thing. The one thing that we thought is going to get better with KABAM hiring players from the community is that things like this will happen less. Right? Unfortunately, and this isn't meant to be targeted at any single one of the YouTubers / players that KABAM has hired since then, because they work in different departments. I don't know exactly their job duties overall. But in relative times, consistently, it kind of has been shown and proven that you absolutely cannot design any piece of content based on the capabilities, advice, or ideas of these players. Like the CCP challenges where we had Starhand, Spider-Man Massacre, and Spider-Man 2099 Selector. Several of those were some of the worst things this game has ever did to their players. And it wasn't done by somebody, in KABAM HQ who hardly plays the game or something like that. It was done by skilled players to us. So it was done by effectively the CCP members, the CCP players. In the Karina Necropolis challenge, the one challenge that everyone hated was done by a CCP player to us. The others were designed by the game team, and one of those was designed by a CCP player, the Dimensional Beings one. And that is by far the most hated one. And you'd have thought the players that play the game kind of like, go through it and, I don't know, Dorky DJ, Karate Mike, MSD, DLL, whoever works there and, can do input on this, would play through this and say, it feels bad, like, you shouldn't do it, or we should change it, or there are things we can improve. And it's like, none of them did. And none of them. Because I refuse to believe that, they played through this and they said, this is fun, I enjoyed it, this is a great piece of content. If they did, they were like, I don't know. I cannot possibly imagine how anybody who knows anything about this game, this community, particulars about champion acquisition, about things that we enjoy and stuff like that, how any person in the know-how would think this content would go down well with the player base. It is very hard for me to kind of like figure out the chain of actions and the failures of the logic that you have to go through for this content to go from planning phase, to design phase, to implementation phase, some sort of testing phase, to being released live, where at no point, somebody says like, no, this shit, or you shouldn't do it this way, or, people will hate this. I genuinely struggle to see that, but somehow it has. So there you go. That's what I think about Wheel of Faith. Let me know what you think about Wheel of Faith. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about